Welcome to Leadership Talk, the official Waymaker podcast, where we explore how your organization can achieve more by doing less. Welcome to Leadership Talk, the official Waymaker podcast. I'm your host, Craig Hindman, and this is Stuart Leo, CEO and founder of Waymaker. How are you? And there's a guy wandering back and forth in the window in the background, which is fine. If you're listening, you won't have appreciated that. If you're watching...
Yeah, it's our live studio audience of one.
It's like the Today Show with the people waving through the window in the background.
Yeah. Yep. One day there'll be placards in the background. We love you, Craig. We love you.
Well, Stu, off air, we've just solved the pandemic.
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
We're going to tackle far less.
So if you're a prime minister or a president, just give Craig a call.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, give me a call. I'll let you know what Stu said. Would be good. But today we're going to talk about something a little different, and we're going to talk about employee experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you haven't guessed already, we've been gradually unpeeling the layers of I was going to say layers of the onion, but the layers of Waymaker for the last 5, 6, 7 weeks. Actually, what are we up to? Episode 10. Last 9 weeks.
Yeah, something like that, I think.
Wow. And we've been just stepping through all the core modules of the platform, why it is, what it does, diagnostic, road mapping, OKRs, goal setting, leadership, management, fun. And so we're kicking into, I guess, the next part of this series, which is going deep into the 7 questions. And we're going to do it in reverse because, hey, we just like to do things differently. So we're actually going to start with employee experience and talk about the employee experience curve and talk about the idea of employee experience, because it's quite different to the idea of HR. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, you've been challenged to have a mindset shift from going, actually, I wasn't thinking about my people like that. If you are, great, fantastic. Get in, use our tools. You know, you're a rock star. You're already.
This is affirmation.
Yeah. But if you're going, actually, I don't think like that. As you're listening and thinking about this during the podcast and the episode, that's cool, because not many do. And I certainly didn't in the past at certain times. As we've explored this topic over the last few years, it has reinvented and transformed my own personal thinking to this and helped me understand organisations and people and leadership and management so much better. That's a pretty big sell.
You've already made the allusion to the connection between EX and HR, and we'll unpack that a little bit more in this episode. But firstly, let's start out what is employee experience? Well,
employee experience, actually I could put it in this kind of term. It's the sum of the parts, or the end state, I like to call an end state, of a unified physical and digital platform or experience that equips and empowers teams, particularly leaders, to create the inspirational branded moments and the great moments at every stage and touch point of the customer journey. And so the employee experience, actually I'll say that again, it's the end state of a unified physical and digital platform that equips and empowers leaders and teams to create inspirational branded moments or inspirational moments at every stage and touch point of the customer journey. It's very much the sum of the parts on how we acquire, retain, grow, keep, and reinvent talent throughout an organisation, and so it's a different mindset to thinking about HR, which we'll come to in a moment, and and when I talk about that definition, I think it's probably worth picking out a few key points. An end state, so it's a sum of experiences. It's an experience.
Right.
That's probably the first thing to say. It's a felt and lived experience. And that felt and lived experience should have physical and digital touch points. So what do I mean by that? From the very start of the journey, the employee journey, when we're thinking about where can we work, how can we contribute, we're touching an organisation. How do I understand that organisation? What would I be working or doing if I was working with or for this organisation? And they're probably some of the early digital touch points. We know from high consideration sales that more than 2/3, and by the way, I use the term sales because we're actually pitching for talent in this world.
Yeah, right.
We know from traditional B2B high consideration journeys that people are more than 2/3 of the way through their buyer's journey before they really pop up and tell you who they are. And the similar sorts of statistics appear in employee experience and talent acquisition. So it's an experience, physical and digital. There's
So
digital touch
you're
points.
saying they've already decided that, whether or not they want to work for you, or
Well, I think in this world of competition for talent, if I can put it like that, there's this dance going on between talent and people who can foster and grow that talent and pay compensation for that talent. And there's a lot of competition today for that talent. 10, 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot less competition. There was more likelihood that our parents spent 10 or 15 years in a role, and it was likely that their parents spent sometimes decades or entire life. I know my grandfather, when he came back from the war, he spent his entire life working for the Toowoomba foundry and retired, picked up the golden watch, and that was it. That was working life. I know my father probably had 3 or 4 key roles as I was growing up, max, over the course of his career. But I know I had 3 or 4 key roles by the time I was 30. And I know our kids are going to be different. And so not only is there competition for employees and a fight for talent, but there's a lot of substitutes. So the capacity to freelance and be your own boss today is just it's just such an easier thing to do today than what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so there's a huge amount of competition for talent.
and there's not as much loyalty as there used to be, right? Like I'm not necessarily loyal to a brand or an organization as much as, say, the previous generation was. I'm more free market.
That's right.
Free enterprise sort of.
Yeah, there's a greater sense of loyalty to outcomes versus loyalty to providers. And
I reckon we're the first generation that I think we've witnessed this transition firsthand. I'm going to derail you for a second because I watch this when it comes to football trading season. And and like a generation ago, you would never have heard of the captain of one team, taking a multi-year deal for another team. It's just like that's just not what you do. And now it's just part of the industry.
Yeah,
like people will move clubs mid-season now.
Yeah,
it's a different mindset. It's like the power's back on the employee, maybe a lot more
back on the talent. Yeah, and I think rightly or wrongly, there's pros and cons on all of those. That's the world we live in. So this isn't an ethical statement on what we should or shouldn't do. This is a reality statement. And so in our question, EX is question 6 in the 7 questions.
Right.
How do we acquire, retain and grow our talent through our organisation's principles or brand principles? And when I say principles, I mean values and what drives our culture, and what improvements do we need to make? So question 6, how do we acquire, retain and grow our talent through our core principles, culture, and what improvements do we need to make. And so there's a reason why we talk about talent, not employees, even though the industry talks about this idea of EX, employee experience.
Right.
I want to make the point that really it should be talent experience, because I don't want to pigeonhole this just to employees, because in any organisation, talent is coming from employees, freelancers, contractors, strategic partners. It's a different, very different way of looking at talent in today's world than what we did 10, 20, 30 years ago. There are different structures at play. It's very easy. Well, say Waymaker. We have wonderful people that partner with us, amazing consultants that are partners, that ambassador the brand when they're implementing Waymaker software and doing great consulting and coaching. They're not us. They're not our employees, but we consider them our colleagues. We consider them part of the family around the table. Probably shouldn't use the term family, but you know what I mean. We're part of the team. And the idea here is that talent needs nurturing. And whether we're onboarding a new employee, a new freelancer, a new contractor, a new partner, we've actually got to kind of think about that in a different light. And so this end state of a unified physical digital platform that equips and empowers to create those inspirational moments at every stage and touch point of what? The customer's journey. So why does this talent exist? For the customer.
Yeah.
What are we equipping and empowering people for during the employee experience? Amazing customer moments. So let's be real here. The employee experience doesn't exist just for the sake of the employee. It exists for the employee so that they can deliver amazing customer experiences. And that's why it's question 6. And there's no order or priority to the questions, but rather it's question 6 in our framework, because it's not the last thing, but rather the most important thing to go, how do we create the talent to deliver the customer experience designed by the business model, positioned by the strategy, serving this market and ideal customer in order to solve this purpose and deliver this ultimate vision. That's why it sits in that framework, in that order. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, Stu, we have an experience curve as part of our Waymaker platform. How should we think about employee experience as part of that experience curve in the context of that curve?
Yeah, I mean, good question. Within Waymaker, there's what we call the business level experience curve. So where are we on the journey from idea to market leadership?
Yeah.
And then we have an experience curve for each part of the 6 questions, really, from vision all the way through to employee experience. And so when we talk about the employee experience curve, we're talking about where are we on the journey from idea to market leadership and maturity in this context of the employee experience. And so when we're looking at the diagnostic and looking at the EX curve in particular, we're looking at how well are we creating that unified physical and digital platform that equips and empowers talent to deliver those amazing customer experience moments. And so, as we know from previous episodes, the top side of the experience curve is all about skills and qualities, and the bottom side of the experience curve is all about systems, processes, tools. So we broadly talk about top skills, bottom systems, broad buckets of ideas. And
there's a lot.
There is a lot. And we talk about the experience curve having a series of stages, so finding market fit, to calibrating and building teams, to getting consistent returns as we mature, to becoming real leaders and owning points. So as we think about employee experience, we're thinking about how well are we understanding the personas. Now that's an interesting new term for people traditional in HR. They might talk about roles and responsibilities or jobs, but rather we talk about personas.
Right.
What are the types of people that we need to acquire, and how do they fit the roles we have to provide? What's the employee journey look like from first touch to exit? And how do we define roles? What's our acquisition strategy? What are our cultural foundations? How do we manage documentation? Is there a HR CRM going on? Is there? How do we collaborate together? How do we give people an identity inside the technology systems? We're talking about all the things that when you begin to go on this journey of, oh gosh, could I work for or with this organisation? How do you frictionlessly acquire and engage those people in order to get amazing work done? And so the EX curve is giving circa 25 to 30 digital and physical attributes to go, where are we in our journey of employee experience? Where can we improve? And so when we look at that curve, it should be prompting us to say, firstly, are we thinking EX versus HR? Which would be controversial to some professionals, and that's okay. It's controversial in the same way that CX is to marketing or sales or service, and I'll come to that in a moment. Yeah. So how are we thinking about the employee experience? How are we thinking about nurturing talent? And are we specifically building acquisition, retention, and growth strategies into our talent? And the employee experience curve will help you surface the gaps where you can go, gosh, yeah, we're not really thinking about this. We're not really thinking about our cultural foundations. We're not thinking about on our onboarding program. We're not thinking about our offboarding program, otherwise known as an exit, which in today's day and age is not about, the traditional idea of hiring and firing, but how do you onboard and offboard people, recognising that organisations flex in and out according to market demands, according to cycles in their growth journey. And so offboarding or exiting people is not a negative. That's a genuinely good thing. And the contracting consulting industry is used to this. And so there are lessons to learn as organisations and to think about the journey of the employee. So that's what the employee experience curve is doing. Is that making sense?
Yeah. And you kind of you've started to bleed into my next question, which is just, I guess, deep diving a little bit into the difference between employee experience and HR, traditional HR, and what the differences are. And you've kind of touched on some of those, but did you want to sort of expand on that a little bit?
We should go into that a little bit deeper, shouldn't we? I think let me put it this way, and I know HR departments don't always think as critically as this, but I'll just set this up to be black and white. Often organisations treat HR, and it's so badly named, human resources. That's terrible. It's like you're treating people as objects on the factory line, and it's left over from this industrial mindset of putting 1,000 people in a factory and starting off with ingredients and ending up with a widget at the other end. Human resources. It's just a terrible idea. People are people, and they have inherent values, and when we treat them as resources, we end up treating them badly. And so I'm not saying that HR people do this. In fact, they're probably the ones in the organisation trying to champion the opposite of this. But it's the idea left inside us from the factory mindset. And that ideas have consequences. And that idea of HR permeates out through leaders and managers to going, that human resource didn't work very well. Kick them out, get another one. In the same way that tie didn't work very well, take it off, get another one. And we start to think about humans as objects, and we objectify them, and both you and I have had some lived experience going through this in organisations. I hope I'm not throwing you in the deep end there, but you know what? It's really, really crappy, and it sucks. And there have been times as a leader and a manager, I've done that to people, and I've stepped back and gone, "Oh man, wowzers! I'm so sorry." You know, we fall into this. It's easy to fall into. So this idea of HR being about managing people. Remember when we talked leadership and management, we said leaders lead people and people manage systems. And HR, spins that on its head and gets people thinking that they must manage people like they would manage an object. And it's just a terrible idea.
I think drawing the parallel to that industrialized, the Industrial Revolution, and like the people were commodities, or
correct,
or whatever, is a really good.
And it comes from that horrible time in history where if the 13-year-old kid came out coughing and spluttering from that coal mine, you just went and got another one, and all political views aside, that's why we have great labour movements and union movements of today. Because people took advantage of people, and we need to acknowledge that when we think about people as capital, we're not thinking about people. And
how do you stop it though from organizations, CEOs, managers, that sort of thing, walking on eggshells because they've just got to pander to the felt needs of the employees all the time?
Well, it doesn't mean you remove objectivity. It doesn't mean you go, oh, well, I must, pander to you in order to retain this talent. Yeah. Employee experience is about setting up a customer journey for talent. And we talk about this in customer experience and sales and marketing and service. Not every customer is a good customer. There have been a few customers in my time that we've looked each other fair in the eye and said, yeah, I don't think we're good for each other. You're not a good customer for me and I'm not a good supplier to you. Let's fire each other. And that's a terrible
not always
moment.
Quite that jovial.
It's definitely not. And there have been loads of customers where it's like, I just want to serve you because you're a great fit for us. And in a lot of service organisations and a lot of B2B organisations, you talk about ideal customer fit. Not every product and service is ideal for every customer. And there is a bit of a myth out there in customer land that just because they're a customer, you should serve them. Sometimes it's bad customer service to sell them what you're selling them. They're just not ready for it. They're just not good for it. They're not going to be able to pay for it. Not every customer should be served. And that sounds like a radical idea, but it's not. Not every talent, even though they might have great talent, should stay in your organisation.
Yeah.
And so we don't ignore the cultural character aspects of the competency and capability elements of the talent. But at the same time, we don't treat the talent like an object and pull them in, screw them hard for 3, 4, 5 years, chuck them out when there's nothing left of them and go get another one. That's human resource capital management. Employee experience says, gosh, just like a customer, you should come into our organisation and you should leave better for it. Because if you leave better for it, our customers are better for you, and you're now a brand advocate for what we're doing here. And that's a mindset shift. That's it's really hard. Like, it's so hard, which is why there's an employee experience curve, because it's hard. And it really shifts your thinking. I have a felt shift in it when I think about my team around me. And you go, gosh, I've got to think about this differently. The other thing it does is it acknowledges where you are as an organisation in that employee experience journey. So, we're at this time in point, we're a young startup. We're about a year old. with less than a decent quarter in the marketplace. And if you're listening to this in 1 or 2 or 3 years' time, I hope, where you're still going, wow, gee, that sounds surprising. They're doing so well. But that's the reality of where we are today, which means the way we onboard somebody today is going to be very different to the way we onboard somebody next quarter and in 8 quarters' time. And because each quarter we're asking and answering the 7 questions, of which EX is one, determining the highest priorities, but continuously improving and ensuring that we're lifting that and growing that maturity. So the big difference, and I've kind of rambled a bit there, the big difference between HR and EX is it reframes the context. It shifts the mindset. EX says, right, as an organisation, our sole job is to acquire customers, but in order to acquire customers through our unique new product, service and innovation, we actually need to acquire talent to sustain the acquiring of customers. And we need to treat talent kind of like the same way we treat customers, that as customers come in and engage with us, and if they're the right fit, they're going to grow and retain with us, and they're going to leave us one day better for having known us. And we're going to attract and grow and retain and develop talent, and they're going to leave us one day offboarding or exiting, and that's okay. In fact, we expect that to happen, but they're going to leave us better for having known us, and therefore we're better for having known them. And there's been an equitable exchange of value going on. There's a value proposition to the talent as much as there's a value proposition to the customer, and our talent exists for the purpose of the customer, not for the purpose of the leader or the manager. And our customer exists not for the purpose of the talent, but for the purpose of the value we're creating to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really, really good. So I'm a manager, I'm a CEO of an organization, and you've just kind of like blown my mind right now. You've just kind of messed with my thinking. Probably just because I've approached employees under that banner of HR for so long. How do I start shifting, my organization to start looking at employees in this way?
So that's a great question. And you've really got to step back and go, okay, I'm listening. I'm hearing that there's a better way out there of thinking about people. Am I prepared to go on a journey that's going to upend and create some discomfort for a period of time in order to achieve something utterly transformational? And if you are prepared to do that, work with a Waymaker advisor, work with a coach or a consultant, and think through. And one of the very first things you can start to do, which is the very first thing we do on the customer experience side, is to step back and go, what does our employee journey look like? And so if you jump into any of our playbooks and resources in Waymaker Academy, in EX, you'll find an EX journey. And it's going to set up an employee journey. How do we acquire? What are the messages? What are the hot buttons? What are the touch points? What are the roadblocks and challenges? How do we bring somebody out there who doesn't know us yet into knowing us, so aware, into considering us, into actually deciding to work with us? And then how do we retain them? What does the first 30 days, 90 days, 365 days look like? And how do we grow them? What are we doing in order to grow that person? A lot of organisations think that it's not their job to grow their people. That's the job of the individual. And in part, that's right. The only person responsible for your growth is you. But you growing you inside an organisation that wants to grow you is like soil and water. And a great tree is going to survive with both. So we've got to think about that.
So it's more than just paying a PD.
Correct. I mean, you think about it economically, although I'm trying to get you to not think about it economically. But if you have a resource and you just treat it as a value in today's dollars, well, the curse of inflation means that in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, it's worth significantly less if you have not increased and grown it. So no economically minded leader is going to let resources deplete. You want to replenish them, nourish them, and sustain them and grow them. So although, slap across the face, I don't want you thinking economically about people, it helps to have an economic mindset as part of the holistic mindset. So we've got to think about how do we grow those people. And so when we step back and we're going, where do we start? Well, if you were building a customer experience program, you go, wow, what are the roadblocks and challenges to acquiring customers? I'd start there. What are the roadblocks and challenges to acquiring talent? Gosh, have you been through your application process recently? Does it suck completely?
Yeah.
Some organizations, it's like bureaucracy trying to get through that process. And yeah, there's reasons to filter people out, but my goodness, talk about a friction-full experience versus a friction-free experience. And in customer experience, we're always trying to identify roadblocks, challenges, friction. We want to make it friction-free for the right customer to find us, get in, buy us, grow with us, move on. We want to do the same with talent. So what kind of friction exists? That's what I'd be saying. And then remap it. Just start there. Start with that. Remap it. Design a customer journey. Do it with your leaders, your HR team, your key leaders. Do it with some employees. Get some feedback. And then test it. Get an MVP up in 2, 3, 4 weeks and pop it out there for the next role and see what happens. You might be dramatically surprised. And as you start to do that, you're going to reframe how you think about talent, and you'll start to go, gosh, the better I can acquire, retain and grow talent, the better I can acquire, retain and grow customers. Sorry,
have you done any, no, this is completely left of field. Have you done any research lately on employee retention rates in organizations and what's good and what's not?
Well, we haven't. And look, that is just a function of what are we prioritizing right now. But I mean, that's varying wildly according to industry and organization. But I don't think a retention rate, is a retention rate valid? Yes, a retention rate is valid. Is it the only valid metric? And I'd say no. I think we think about a net promoter score as one of those top, few metrics we track in customer experience, which is a measure of advocacy a customer has towards a brand. So I'd be looking at employee net promoter scores or talent net promoter scores, not just from employees, but from partners and suppliers and the people working with you to make things happen. And I'd be looking at engagement rates. I'd be thinking about engagement and advocacy and satisfaction in employee experience in the same way we do in customer experience. And I think HR has a similar transformation going on to what sales and marketing and service had many years ago. And from 2.8 to 2.20, we've really had this transformation of traditional siloed departments into understanding business through the customer experience and the employee experience. And that's why we talk about those two experiences inside the experience curve framework.
That's awesome. Hey, we might need to wrap this one up. This is actually part one of a couple of episodes we're going to commit to just talking about employee experience. But, if you want to get started, if you actually just need to figure out where you sit on the employee experience curve, then you can jump on waymaker.io, take the diagnostic. Have I said that right, Stu? You smiled at me. Okay, great.
I was just mutual what am I saying? Admiring you, Craig.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Take the diagnostic, and you can actually start mapping out what that actually looks like. for your employees as as well. So as well as your customers and et cetera, et cetera. So this this episode we've talked about, okay, what's the difference between EX and HR? We're going to talk in future episodes about EX performance, EX culture, frameworks, that type of thing. So
there's a couple of exciting episodes coming up. The next one, we're going to talk about how we create the link between organisational goals and metrics to employee and talent goals and metrics, and how you can design that. And we've got a playbook around that. It's really hard, and most organisations actually miss it. So we've simplified that for most, and we're going to talk about that in our next episode.
Awesome. Sounds like a good way to talk about how to achieve more by doing this.